Most people think that when an avoidant person goes quiet on you, the story ends there. He pulls back, he says the thing, you cry the tears, and whatever was between you slowly dissolves into a memory you learn to stop visiting. That's what everyone believes. It's the story we tell ourselves to survive the first week. And I'm going to tell you something that might feel unsettling. For him, that's often the moment the story actually begins. You're not here because you're sad, exactly. You're here because you're replaying that exact phrase he used. I'm just not feeling it the same way. I need some space. I'm not ready for this right now. And you're trying to decide if you misunderstood. That's the specific hell of it. You keep going back to the last conversation like it's a contract you signed too quickly, rereading the clauses, hunting for the tone you misread, the moment where you could have done it differently. And underneath all of that is the question you won't say out loud. If I had been quieter or warmer or more patient or a smaller version of myself, would he have stayed? I want you to notice something about that question. It isn't about him. It's about you negotiating with a closed door. Here's the truth. You are sitting in a room that he left, and every hour you spend decoding his exit is an hour you refuse to see the room. You're still in his orbit, checking, waiting, reading his silence like a message in a language you could crack if you just tried hard enough. And here's what nobody tells you about an orbit. It keeps you close enough to hurt and far enough to never be chosen. It isn't closeness. It's proximity with a toll. He wasn't ready. He just didn't want you. Those are two different sentences. And the first one is doing an awful lot of emotional labor for women who deserve the truth of the second one. Not ready sounds like a timing problem, something a calendar could fix, something to be patient with, something you could wait out like weather. Doesn't want you sounds harsh, but harsh is sometimes the kindest word available because harsh is honest, and honesty is the only thing that lets you move. The tragedy of an avoidant man is that he can't usually tell you the difference because he believes his own press release. He tells you he isn't ready and means it with his whole chest. But readiness was never the barrier. The barrier is that his emotional operating system is a fire escape disguised as a personality. And no amount of your patience, your warmth, or your perfect timing is going to make him feel safe enough to climb back in. That was never your job. That's his work, and he hasn't started it. Now, let me explain something slowly. Not because you aren't smart, you're smarter than this situation is making you feel, but because the mechanism underneath all of this is one nobody ever showed you. When a man is built the way this man is built, leaving isn't the point. The point is the relief. I need you to hear that sentence slowly. Some people experience intimacy as a home. He experiences it as a weight. Not at first, not during the good weeks, but the moment it starts to feel real, something in him reaches for the door. It has nothing to do with whether you were good. You could be perfect and he would still feel the walls closing in. Because the walls closing in is the feeling itself, and the feeling was never about you. We give this a clinical word, avoidant attachment, and the word makes it sound like a diagnosis handed down from a podium. But really, it's just a shape a person takes when closeness frightens them. It starts somewhere small, usually in childhood. A child who learns that needing someone is dangerous, that dependence gets you left. So they grow up building a life where they never truly depend, where they leave before they can be left, where desire is managed the way a bank manages risk. He doesn't know he's doing it. That's part of the tragedy of him. He believes his own press release. I don't need anyone. I'm fine on my own. And that belief isn't strength. It's a suit of armor so heavy that he can't feel his own heartbeat through it. And here's something most people don't see coming. The first few weeks of his freedom are real for him. I'm not going to pretend he's suffering when he isn't. That lie has kept too many women waiting on a grief that wasn't happening. He feels relief. The deactivation works the way it was built to work. But here's the piece nobody hands you. Shutting down a feeling doesn't delete it. It stores it. Every moment of closeness he couldn't process. Every tender thing he backed away from. Every I love you he swallowed. It all goes onto a shelf in a room he never visits. and the shelf doesn't empty itself. The longing doesn't die when an avoidant person leaves. It goes underground. It becomes a low hum he can't name, a restlessness he'll blame on his job, his city, the weather, anything except the woman-shaped gap he refuses to look at. So when he left you, he wasn't choosing against you in the way you picture in the worst hours. He was choosing against a feeling. The feeling was never going to let him rest either way. But here's where you come in. Because what you do in the weeks after his exit is the difference between handing him a story he can live with and handing him a mirror he can't look away from. Here's the thing most people get wrong. When he created distance, he created something else without meaning to. He created a space, and spaces don't stay empty. Either you fill that space with your presence, the texts, the check-ins, the accidental, just wanted to see if you were okay at midnight, the slow drip of your attention, or the space fills with something else entirely. He didn't expect that. He expected you to chase. That's the choreography everyone knows. The dance where the leaver watches the one who was left perform her own vanishing. He didn't expect you to go quiet. He expected you to chase instead, to send the apology you don't owe, to ask the questions he won't answer, to stay close enough to want and far enough not to claim. And because he expected it, he budgeted for it. He built his comfort on the assumption that you'd still be there, doing the work of missing him out loud. The moment you don't, his math stops working. And a man whose math has stopped working is a man who has started paying attention. Picture this. It's week 2, and he's alone in his apartment at midnight. He's been fine, mostly. He went out with his friends. He laughed. He told himself he made the right call. But at some point in the night, he reaches for his phone the way any of us reaches for an old habit. Not to text anyone, just to look, and there's nothing from you. No late night message, no voice note. No, I know you said space, but I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. Just the quiet battery icon blinking in the dark. And something in him registers it as a small wrongness, the way you notice a watch has stopped even when you weren't relying on it for the time. He puts the phone down. He goes back to his night. But the wrongness has a half-life, and it hasn't even begun to decay. He got what he asked for, and that's the part nobody warns them about. Freedom is a beautiful idea until it's a Thursday night with nobody in it. He wanted the space. He said so. He meant it. He'll defend it to anyone who asks. But space, once granted, doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like what it is. A room with one chair in it, and the chair is his. And across from it, there's an empty chair that used to have you in it. He'll tell himself the empty chair is a relief. The mind writes freedom. The body keeps a different ledger, and the body writes loss. Let me be clear about something, because some of you are hearing this and feeling a secret relief on his behalf, a quiet fear that he's actually fine, that he's out there thriving and you were replaceable. Here's the truth. The relief is real. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you he's suffering from day one. His whole nervous system spent years practicing this escape. And the first chapter of freedom genuinely feels good. But relief and repair aren't the same thing. A man can feel relieved and still be wounded. He can feel light and still be running. He can believe he's finally got his life back, while a part of him he won't. Inspect starts quietly taking inventory of what he traded. That's the false independence, not real wholeness, but a very convincing imitation of it, and the imitation has a shelf life. It ends the first night he reaches for his phone out of habit and finds nothing. Or the first Thursday he realizes no one is waiting up to hear about his day. That's when the imitation starts to crack. Here's the thing about silence. At first it's just the absence of sound. A blank, a nothing, a pause you can mistake for peace. But absence has a weight, and weight compounds. What you've given him isn't quiet. It's a void, and the void doesn't stay empty. Within days, it starts to echo, and what echoes inside a void is never abstract. It's specific. It's the sound of your laugh at something only you two found funny. It's the exact way you said his name when you were glad to see him. It's the warmth your absence now frames, the way a frame makes a picture look finished. He didn't budget for specifics. He budgeted for a general relief, and a general relief cannot compete with the specific. And here's where the urge to chase becomes a trap you can see from a mile away and still fall into. Think about it like this. There's a volleyball in a pool, and you've decided that keeping it underwater is the same as keeping it. So you hold it down. Your arms ache. The whole time you're watching the door, waiting to see if he'll notice you holding it, and the ball is fighting you the entire time. It wants to rise. It will always want to rise. And you're exhausted, and here's the part you can't see from inside the pool. Holding it down was never the way to keep it. The way to keep something is to let it float on its own, see if it stays near your side of the water. Some balls float away, some stay. But you'll never know which one he is while your arms are burning. Now, let me walk you through what chasing actually does, because I don't think you've ever seen it laid out plainly. Every time you reach out after he's pulled away, you do two things at once. You refill the space he created so he never has to feel it. And you answer the only question the silence could have asked, so he never has to wonder. You are, in that moment, completing his story for him. His story says, she'll always be there. She'll absorb the distance. She'll wait. And every text you send is a signature on that story, scrawled by your own hand. You're not fighting for him in those moments. You're doing the admin of a one-sided relationship. Does he even miss you? That's the question you keep asking yourself in the shower. And I want to answer it honestly, because you deserve better than a lie dressed up as hope. Maybe not yet. Maybe not in the way you're praying for. Missing you isn't the thing that matters, and centering your recovery on whether he misses you is how you stay small in a room where you're the only person left. What matters is what the silence makes him confront, and that's a different thing entirely. Because here's what silence does that no argument, no tiffle speech, no carefully worded message can do. It hands him his own behavior and makes him hold it without a witness. When you chase, you give him your pain as a cushion. He gets to watch you hurt, and watching you hurt, as terrible as that sounds, lets him feel like the reasonable one, the one who was right to leave. Because look how you're falling apart. Look how you can't let go. Your reaction becomes his alibi, but take the reaction away and the alibi disappears with it. He's left holding the exit he made, with no performance to soften it, no storm to justify it. Just the plain sight of what he did to a good thing, and the quiet question of why he did it. That's the mirror. Your silence is a mirror held up to him, and he will find it far more unsettling than any fight you could have picked. And you'll ask yourself, in the worst hours, if any of it even registered, if you were just a placeholder, an episode, a woman he'll forget by spring. And I'm not going to insult you with a cheap, of course, you mattered. What I'll tell you instead is this. The question isn't whether you mattered to him. You did, the way anything real matters to anyone. The question is whether he can sit with what matters without running from it. And that isn't a question about you. It's a question about his ceiling, and you cannot lower your life to fit under his ceiling. That's the whole choice of this period. Whether you keep shrinking to stay inside the range of a man who can't meet you, or whether you grow past the range and let him decide, from a distance, if he's willing to grow too. Imagine him on some Thursday night a month from now, at a dinner with someone new, someone perfectly acceptable, someone who looks like the right answer on paper. And all through the meal, he's doing it. That thing I told you about, the tongue finding the empty socket. He's comparing. He's not even aware he's doing it, which is exactly why it's so dangerous for him. The comparison is running underneath the conversation, an old song playing under new dialogue, and the new woman can't compete with a memory she was never in. She doesn't know she's auditioning for a role that's still cast in his mind by you. He didn't expect you to become the standard. He expected you to become a chapter instead, something he read, something he closed, something that stopped mattering once the book was back on the shelf. But a standard isn't a chapter. A standard is the measuring tape he carries into every room, and every woman after you gets measured against the memory of a warmth he only recognizes now that he can't reach it. That's the cruelty of his architecture. It warned him away from the real thing, then made everything after feel like a copy. This is the part nobody's going to like hearing, so I'll say it gently. You cannot chase an avoidant person into wanting you. Pressure is the one thing his whole architecture was built to escape. The moment he feels your need closing in, the door that was slightly ajar closes again. And it closes not because he doesn't care, but because caring to him is exactly what the door protects against. Wanting you for a man like this has to be discovered, and discovery requires distance. It cannot be demanded, negotiated, or performed into existence. And before you decide that this is the reason you'll finally go quiet to make him come back, let me be clear about something. If getting him back is the only reason you do this, it will leak out of you. It will leak into your posture, into the friends group chat, into the way you jump when your phone lights up. There's nothing wrong with wanting him back. There's something wrong with making your dignity a costume you wear to attract him. And I want to walk through this with you one piece at a time, because the mechanism from here gets strange. And strange is where most people stop looking. He left. He told himself the story. And then one night, somewhere between week 2 and week 3, a small crack appears in the story. He finds himself wondering something he didn't expect to wonder. Why isn't she fighting? Where did the chasing go? What is she doing right now that doesn't involve me? And here's the thing, the wondering is what undoes him, not the missing, not the regret, the wondering. Because wondering is a door you keep opening, and every time he opens it, he finds the room a little more real. He told himself it would take a week. Give it a week, he figured, and the silence becomes routine. The absence becomes scenery. The whole thing becomes a story he can close like a book he was done with. That's what he believed on day 1. And here's the truth he didn't count on. Silence doesn't become routine. It becomes architecture. It builds. Week 1, it's a blank. Week 2, it's a wrongness he can't name. The way you notice a watch has stopped even when you weren't relying on it for the time. Week 3, it's a question he keeps circling at 2 in the morning. Why isn't she fighting? Where did the chasing go? What is she doing right now that doesn't involve me? And here's the part that truly undoes him. He can't answer any of them because the only person who could answer them is the one person he told to go away. You have to understand something about an avoidant man's mind when it's left alone with its own creation. He didn't expect you to become the absence. He expected you to remain the presence instead. Close enough to reassure him, far enough never to challenge him, the warmth he could visit when he wanted it and ignore when he didn't. The absence is a different creature entirely. It doesn't orbit him. It doesn't wait for him. It doesn't check the time against his schedule. The absence has a life of its own, and a life of its own, to a man who built his entire identity on not needing anyone, is a mirror he can't look away from, because it shows him the one thing he never had to see while you were still there. What his life actually looks like with no warmth in it at all. Let me be clear about one thing. I'm not telling you he's going to crumble, and I'm not promising a grand reunion where he shows up at your door having done the years of work in 3 weeks. Sometimes he never comes back, and sometimes coming back is the worst thing that could happen to you, because he returns the same way he left, unchanged, and you get to watch your heart make the same mistake twice. What I'm telling you is about the mechanism, because understanding the mechanism is the only thing that will keep you sane in the weeks when your hands are shaking and your pride is exhausted. The mechanism says, longing doesn't disappear when an avoidant person leaves. It goes underground. It waits. And it can only surface under conditions you create by accident, by stopping the performance. I want to pause on that for a second because it's the most important sentence in this entire conversation. Longing can only surface in the absence of pressure. He can only wonder what he lost when nothing is shoving the feeling down his throat. That's why your quiet works. And I use the word works with hesitation because I'd rather you hear this as physics than as a game. There's no manipulation in it. There's only cause and effect. When you remove your energy from his system has to account for the loss. It doesn't get to pretend nothing changed. And the pull you had on him was never something you did to him. It was something you were. He only regains access to the feeling of missing it in the space where you used to be. That space is the mystery. And here's what most people miss about mystery. Mystery isn't hiding yourself. Mystery is having a life so full that he can't know all of it from the doorway. Mystery is the natural byproduct of a woman who stopped trying to be known by a man who refused to look. Does he ever feel it? Does the absence ever reach him at all? Or is that just your imagination running laps in the dark? I hear the question, and I want you to hear the answer. He feels it the way you feel a tooth after it's been pulled. You don't feel the tooth. You feel the space where the tooth used to be, and your tongue keeps going back to it without permission. That's what you are to him now. Not a person he can hold. A space he keeps checking. And the checking is where the story changes for him. Because a man who keeps checking a space is a man who has started to grieve something he was too proud to keep, and grief is the last thing his whole architecture was built to avoid. Now, watch what happens when the space is allowed to do its work, because this is the image I want you to hold for the rest of your life. He wanted a void. That was the point of the door, the silence, the emptiness, the relief of a life with no one's heart leaning on it. But a void, left alone, doesn't stay empty. It becomes a vacuum, and a vacuum doesn't ask permission before it pulls things toward itself. It pulls his attention. It pulls his memory. It pulls every specific thing you ever said and holds them up to him like evidence. Then the vacuum becomes an echo, and the echo is worse, because an echo repeats. It's your voice coming back to him off walls he built himself. Then the echo becomes a weight, and a weight doesn't need to be loud to be heavy. It just needs to be there, and yours is there. Then the weight becomes an inquiry. Not "I miss her," because he won't let himself say that word yet, but something quieter and more honest. Why did I do that? What was I protecting? What exactly was I running from? And the inquiry, if he lets it sit long enough, becomes a reckoning, not with you, never with you, but with the version of himself that left a good thing to feel safe, and then discovered that the safety is the loneliest room he has ever been in. One image, the entire way through. The void he chose becomes the void that watches him. And there's a particular shape this takes that I want you to recognize before it ever reaches your phone. Some avoidant men come back early, week 3, week 4, not to commit, but to test the door. They send the low-effort text, the meme at midnight, the hope you're doing okay that costs them nothing. And if you answer with the old hunger, if you reply in minutes with the old warmth, they get exactly what they came for. Proof that the safety net is still strung. Proof that you're still in the wings waiting for your cue. And then they go quiet again, guilt-free, their relief restocked. That's not a step toward you. That's a man doing inventory on his exit and finding it painless. The only response that costs him anything is the one he didn't expect. The one where you're warm but brief, present but not available, kind but not hungry. You don't have to explain. You don't have to punish. You just don't get back in line, and a line that won't reform is the one thing his emotional immaturity has no script for. And here's what most people miss about that moment. The moment he tests the door and finds it locked. Some men, when they meet a locked door, knock louder. They double the texts, they push the boundary, they get anxious in the exact proportion they were avoidant before. But most don't. Most do the quieter thing, the more human thing. They start telling the story of you to their friends, to themselves, and it comes out different every time. And each retelling softens it a little more. You become, in his inner monologue, the one who got it right while he got away. And I want to give you the full equation for why that happens, because it's the whole engine of this story. He rejected you at a moment when his fear was louder than his feeling. Your silence didn't argue with the fear. It didn't beg. It didn't bargain. It didn't try to outshout his nervous system. It just let the feeling outlive the fear, and feelings outlive fears the way water outlives heat. Given enough time and no one fanning the flames, the fear cools to a memory, and the feeling is still standing in the middle of the room. That's the reunion nobody sells you in the movies. It isn't him realizing you were perfect. It's him as realizing he was the limitation and you were never the problem his exit was solving. And here's the sentence I need you to hear before we move on. You don't need to be chosen by a man who needed to lose you to see you. You need to be chosen by someone who could see you while he had you. Everything else is him catching up to a conclusion you already reached. So the question flips, and the flip is the whole second half of this story. It stops being what is he doing and becomes what are you doing? Because as long as he is the weather and you are the woman checking the forecast, nothing has changed. The pattern only breaks when you stop being the casualty of his narrative and start being the author of your own. And that's where I want to walk you now. Here's the part most people skip, and it's the part that actually matters. While he's sitting in the echo he built, you're in the room you've been avoiding, the one with your own life in it, dusty and quiet. The curtains drawn for months because you were always looking out the window toward him instead of around at what you'd made. The silence you gave him was never going to be only for him. It was always going to land on you too, and how you sit inside it is the whole game. Most women spend those weeks either chasing him or fighting the urge to, and both of those are just him with different lighting. The woman who comes out the other side whole is the one who finally turned around and faced her own room. Here's what most people miss about the weeks after a rejection. They aren't only when you heal. They're when you get found out by yourself. Everything you papered over while you were orbiting him comes up for air. The friendships you let go quiet. The hobbies you dropped like they were weights. The goals you postponed because you were waiting to see if he'd come along for the ride. And it feels like punishment at first, all of it surfacing at once. But it's not punishment. It's inventory. It's your own reckoning. And you get to choose what happens in it. Whether you look at the list and despair or look at the list and start. This is the part nobody's going to like hearing, so I'll say it quietly. You weren't only sad while you were with him. You were small. You were editing yourself in real time, checking his mood like a weather report before you spoke, measuring your needs against his availability and finding your needs wanting. That's not love, that's surveillance. A woman doing reconnaissance on her own heart to make sure it didn't inconvenience anyone. And here's the thing, the reason the silence is so unbearable in the first weeks isn't only grief, it's withdrawal. You're coming off a substance called his attention, and withdrawal aches, and the ache will try to convince you it's proof that you need him. It isn't. The ache is just your nervous system learning to run on your own electricity again. Give it the weeks. It learns, and the transformation itself is quieter than the movies. You stop checking the time he usually texts. You stop preparing sentences for a conversation he isn't having with you. You stop dressing for a room he isn't in. Small things, invisible things, but each one is a brick being taken out of an altar you built to him. And then one day you notice you've gone a whole afternoon without thinking his name. And instead of being terrified that you're forgetting him, you feel a strange relief at remembering yourself. That's not numbness. That's self-worth coming back online, cell by cell, and it comes back fastest when you stop feeding the thing that starved it. He didn't expect you to rebuild. He expected you to stay parked at the intersection where he left you, hazard lights on, waiting for him to drive back through. That's the toll rejection takes on the person who does the rejecting. The assumption that the rejected one will stay in place, fixed, frozen, still in love, still available, still the exact same woman he left. And here's the beautiful cruelty of your silence. You don't stay in place. Week 1, you're devastated. Week 3, you're quiet. Week 6, you're reading a book he never knew you wanted. Week 10, you're laughing with your friends in a kitchen. and you don't even think to mention his name because he isn't in the frame of your life anymore. The you he rejected no longer exists. He rejected a woman who was performing for him, and the woman quietly rebuilding is not that performer. This is the moment they call the power shift, and it isn't a trick. He left a woman he could predict, and somewhere along the way, you became unpredictable. And a man who can't predict you can't stop thinking about you. That's not a game you're playing. That's the honest consequence of becoming whole in the space where he expected you to stay broken. Now, let me explain something slowly. The difference between healing and performing, because most women get this wrong and it costs them months. There's a version of going quiet that is still all about him. You stay silent so he'll chase you. You post the pictures so he'll see them. You time your absence so his calendar feels it. I'm not telling you to be cold, and I'm certainly not telling you to become a strategy. The mystery that draws a man like this can't be manufactured. He's spent his whole life detecting performance, and performance registers as pressure, and pressure sends him out the door again. What draws him is the real thing, a woman whose life is oriented around itself, not around the question of whether he's looking. She doesn't know when he'll call, and more importantly, she doesn't schedule her day around the possibility. She's not in the wings. She's not on standby. She stopped auditioning. And here's the original image I want to leave you with, one you won't read in the articles. There's a reason the ocean looks like it's retreating when the tide goes out. It isn't leaving. It's gathering. Your silence was a tide going out, and what looked like loss, the withdrawing water, the exposed shore, the absence, was your strength pulling back to where it could gather itself. The ocean doesn't apologize for the tide. It doesn't explain it. It just returns with more water than it left with. And by then, the shore has learned to recognize the rhythm. The shore either learns to meet the tide or it gets taken by it. So in those weeks, you get to ask the question that matters more than whether he comes back. Who is she becoming? Not who is she to him. Who is she when nobody is watching, when he isn't coming back, when the quiet phone is just a Tuesday now? And the honest answer, once you're past the first brutal weeks, is someone you haven't met in a long time. She has opinions she stopped voicing. She has appetites she stopped feeding. She has an evening that belongs entirely to her. That woman is not a consolation prize for losing him. That woman is the actual prize. You just couldn't see her while you were standing in his shadow. And everything that follows, every boundary you set, every standard you raise, every time you decline to be his second choice, is built on the discovery of her. Self-respect isn't a lecture you give yourself. It's a muscle you either use or lose, and the first time you use it is the night you decide, out loud and alone, that you are no longer available for the bare minimum. The dynamic between you two, if there's ever a dynamic again, will not be the one you left. You don't get the old version of this back. The one where he held all the power and you held all the hope. You only get the new version, if there is one, where you walk into the room carrying your dignity like you know exactly what it weighs. And that's not revenge and it's not punishment. It's just the truth of what happened to you. You can't unlearn what you learned. You can't unknow that you survived the thing you were sure would kill you. That knowledge is permanent, and it's the most magnetic thing a woman can carry because it shows up in her voice, in her stillness, in the way she doesn't jump when his name appears on her screen. She may still feel the old warmth, but the warmth no longer runs the thermostat. And now let's talk about the weeks themselves, because insight without movement just becomes a very sad podcast that only you are listening to. The difference between a woman who stays stuck for 2 years and a woman who rebuilds in 2 seasons isn't the depth of her feelings. It's that the second woman understood something about small choices. Healing doesn't happen in grand moments. It happens in ordinary days, in decisions so unglamorous that we skip them, waiting for a big feeling that's never coming. So let me give you the small ones, because they're the ones that actually work. Pick up the phone, not for him, for the people you went quiet on while you were orbiting him. You have friends who stopped calling because they learned you were always busy with his moods. Call them. Not to debrief the breakup for the 100th time, but to ask how they are, to laugh at the same joke you laughed at when you were 19, to sit in a kitchen and just be a person for an hour. You'd be amazed what happens to your nervous system when you stop narrating your grief and start being present in someone else's life. Move your body. I'm not selling you a fitness program. I'm telling you what the research and my own life have both shown me. Grief lives in the body, and the body has to move it. Walk until the streets stop being the ones you walked with him. Run if you run. Swim if you swim. Stretch on the floor of your room with the music loud. None of this is about looking good for the day he might see you. It's about reminding your physical self that it belongs to you, that it can feel strong again, that aliveness wasn't something he took with him. It was something you let him borrow, and you can have it back. Retie the loose ends, the call you didn't make, the course you didn't sign up for, the town you wanted to visit, the room you were going to repaint. Your life has a list of deferred things, and every one of them was deferred for a reason that no longer exists. That's the quiet accounting of moving on. You don't burn the letters and call it healing. You clear the space where your future was supposed to go, and you start putting things in it, one small real thing at a time, and let yourself grieve on purpose. I know it sounds like a contradiction after everything I've said. I've spent this whole conversation telling you not to orbit him, and now I'm telling you to feel it. But here's the distinction. Grief is something you do with your own pain, and orbiting is something you do with his attention. Grief is honest. Something was real between you, no matter how it ended. You loved him, and loving is never a mistake, even when the man is. So give the grief a time and a place, like any appointment, an evening, a playlist, the privacy of your own room. Cry it out until it's done, then close the door on it and go do a small, ordinary thing. The women who move through this cleanly aren't the ones who never cry. They're the ones who cry in private and rebuild in public. And here's what most people miss. Somewhere in these weeks, the silence stops being about him. At first, your quiet was a message you sent him, whether you meant it that way or not. Then it became a test you were grading. But eventually, if you let it, it becomes a home. You get used to the sound of your own life without a voiceover narrating it toward him. You start to prefer it. And that's the moment everything shifts. The moment the silence isn't something you're performing at a distance anymore, but something you're choosing because it's yours. That's reclaiming. That's the power shift happening on the only stage that was ever yours. And yes, at some point, he might text. Somewhere between week 4 and week 12, the odds that he reaches out climb, because the void has had time to do its work, and his curiosity has finally outrun his pride. And when that message arrives, I need you to hear me clearly. You are not obligated to answer from the place where he left you. If you respond from the woman you've become, not from the woman who would have dropped everything a month ago. You don't have to be cruel, and you don't have to be cold. You just have to be real. And real means you're not his reheated option. You're not his second choice who finally got the call. You can wish him well. You can feel the old warmth stir. And you can still choose to protect the life you rebuilt. Because the life you rebuilt is the point of all of this. Whether he stays or goes is no longer the question that runs your life. The question is whether he can meet the woman you are now. And you already know the alarming truth, which is that most of them can't. Most of the time. That's the universe doing you a favor with a no. And when you're ready, not when you're lonely, not when you need a distraction, but when being with yourself doesn't feel like a punishment anymore, you'll go back out there. And something will have changed in the way you choose. Before, you chose men the way you shop for love under a deadline. You took the warmth that was offered, even the cold warmth, even the warmth with conditions attached, because the alternative looked like an empty shelf. Now you understand that your time isn't something to give away in the first polite conversation. It's something to offer slowly, to observe what a man does with it, to watch whether he handles your warmth like a privilege or like a routine. You'll meet someone who doesn't need to lose you to value you, and the shock of that ease will almost make you cry, because it will finally teach you what the whole stretch of this was trying to tell you. You were never too much. You were just giving everything to someone who'd already decided he couldn't receive it. And that's not a tragedy about you. That's a tragedy about his ceiling. And you are not in the business of lowering yourself to fit under someone else's ceiling anymore. Keep your dignity the way you keep a house. Clean, warm, and not for rent. So here we are at the end of the room. I could hand you more strategies: how to manage the reunion, how to hold the upper hand, how to choreograph the comeback so he feels the loss of you in his bones. But I've been doing this long enough to know that strategy is what you reach for when you're not ready to feel the actual truth, and the actual truth is simpler and harder than any strategy. The truth is this: you were never the problem he was solving. He didn't leave because you were too much. He left because he was too little, too scared, too unfinished. And he built a door between you and called it boundaries when it was really his limitations. And your silence through all of it wasn't you playing him or punishing him or secretly hoping he'd come back. It was you, finally, in your own life, learning what you're willing to live without. That's the sentence I want to leave you with, a fuller version of the one I gave you earlier. Your silence after rejection was never about getting him back. It was you becoming someone who doesn't need to. You're going to be okay. Not in the way that sounds like a slogan, in the way real things settle. The grief will thin out. The phone will get quieter, and then one day it won't matter. And on some ordinary Tuesday, you'll realize you're not waiting anymore, and it won't feel like a victory, just a Tuesday. And that will be the whole win. He'll carry the echo with him for as long as he needs to. And some men carry it for years. And that's not your problem to solve anymore. That's his room now. You have your own. Walk out of here with your dignity. Not the loud kind that needs witnesses. The quiet kind that sleeps well, that doesn't check his story for its own reflection, that knows exactly what it's worth and doesn't negotiate. You gave this your all. Your all is the end of you, never the start of him. Keep moving. Keep your life open. Go be warm somewhere.